Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful to see so many of you here. It's a fantastic opportunity where science meets actually the real world, real sailors that feel at extreme levels. So I'm pleased to have Oli here with us. And the way we structured the afternoon, I give him a little introduction of the project, and then I introduce Oli, and then he will talk about his vision, his work, and why he wanted to engage with us. This project that we're talking about here, the Vendée Globe project, is actually a project that Oli initiated. He approached the Swiss Polar Institute and said, okay, well, I really want to do something in the area of sustainability while sailing around the world. And then the Swiss Polar Institute approached the community in Switzerland and asked for proposals, what type of observations could be actually gathered on such a sailing vessel. Fortunately, we already have a bit of experience, me personally, but the community of working with sailors to make actually CO2 measurements on those sailing boats. And out of this idea, then actually the reality grew, and here we are. Soon we'll probably have some data in a year from now from the Vendée Globe, but in between many other data already. But let me give you first an introduction to why we want to do that. And before I forget to say, this is really a project that's sponsored and organized by the Swiss Polar Institute, but it's together with Thomas Fröhlicher from the University of Bern and Samuel Jacquard at the University of Lausanne. And actually, Oli was this morning at the University of Bern and about a month ago in Lausanne. Okay. Now, so why are we interested in adding CO2 measurements to such sailing vessels that skips around the world? And the main reason is because we want to better understand the role of the ocean as a sink for carbon. Here's some reconstructions over time. Now, this is in the way. I'm trying to move this away here. Here. Reconstructions over time of the amount of carbon that is being taken up by the ocean, starting in 1980 here on the left-hand side, going to 2020, and negative numbers means actually it's carbon uptake by the ocean. Reconstruction over time, you see the black line, or is essentially what we have reconstructed based on observations with uncertainty intervals. The dashed lines is kind of what you expect, kind of a passive role of the ocean, just taking up carbon in response to the growth in atmospheric CO2. And you see actually substantial variability around the expected trend, although the direction is where we want, or what the ocean is going, by taking up more and more carbon in response to the continuously growing CO2 burden in the atmosphere. So and this uptake is huge. I mean, it constitutes about a quarter of the total emissions from fossil fuel burning and land use change, and hence a huge ecosystem service to one that we hopefully can continue to count on, but we don't know for sure. And better understanding of what that carbon sink is, better understanding its dynamics, is one of the key elements essentially of global climate research. Not just carbon research, it's really a fundamental component of what we try to understand from the climate. On the low end, we see actually the distribution of different ocean basins, and I like to emphasize the role of the Southern Ocean here, the region south of 44 South, and that alone is actually taking up very, very significant fraction of the CO2 globally. Just look in terms of the perturbation fluxes, that fraction is even larger. So we have one region that really stands out, even though it is actually in terms of area smaller than the others, perhaps except for the Indian Ocean. It takes a disproportionate amount of carbon up in the atmosphere. So well, but what I also would like to emphasize is that this carbon sink is actually rather dynamic. This is a beautiful animation put together by Köhn based on data product that's very newly developed by Luke Gregory in the research group here, and shows the air sea CO2 flux. Now you can see the switching over actually in delta P CO2, that's a driving force. Where we see red colors, the ocean is actually losing carbon. Where we see blue colors, the ocean is gaining colors. You see a lot of structure elements, the plume from the Amazon which causes actually carbon sink in the Western tropical Atlantic, the upwelling regions here of the coast driving carbon out. But we're going now towards the summer period, and you see a lot of the structure, and those is the element that we need 1 to 4. And then we switch over back to the air CO2 fluxes, which essentially is the delta PCO2, the chemical gradient across between surface ocean and the atmosphere, and then the wind is then pushing the carbon in and out of the system based on this chemical gradient. And you see now how the wind that we want to sail on, maybe with the hurricanes in between here, that are pulling and pushing the carbon in and out of the ocean. So it's a very, very dynamic system, and I think that's the really key message to hear. Yet, when you look at the number of observations available to us, the situation is utterly inadequate to capture actually that variability. So this is the total number of observations ever measured in the last 50 years. And gridded on a 1 degree grid and counted by months. And you see that we have lots of places where there's never ever, not a single ship has been there and have made a CO2 measurement at that location. And not only that location, the whole region here. And here a few cross lines where we have 1 to 2 months per year of observation. So we're very limited in terms of the observational coverage. And that's essentially where Vendée Globe sailors come really big into play, because we don't have a lot of observations in the places they go. And this is from the measurements taken by Oliver Heer in the last Vendée Globe. And these are the total number of measurements globally by everyone on the planet taken during this period, November 20 to January 21. And this single sailor was responsible for 80% of all measurements in these minutes. So you make a difference. So you really make a difference here. And it's more than that. So actually, a PhD student working with Peter Lunch, she published a paper where she looked at what is the impact actually of these additional measurements on our ability to constrain the ocean carbon sink. And wherever you see these hatched lines and the color behind it, mean that the addition of these measurements added a significant change to the product that we use to actually reconstruct the ocean carbon sink. So wherever it's red, we're changing the fluxes of 0.2 mole per square meter per year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the global mean uptake is 0.5. That drives essentially all this 25% of removal of carbon from the atmosphere from our emissions. That's 0.5. And here you have 0.2. One single type sailor sailing around the world makes changes of the order about almost 50% of the mean flux that we expect. So it's interesting. Globally, it didn't make a big difference, because in this region where you sail through the Southern Ocean, that leads actually to a positive. So actually the ocean taking up less than we had thought, whereas in the North Atlantic, the ocean is taking up more than we had thought without those measurements. And it's easy, now that's your selling point soon. So the total number of the amount of carbon that we're talking about here, we're going into millions of tons of carbon. And now you can multiply that by 100 as an average cost for a ton of CO2. You're making measurements that change the carbon sink in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars or Swiss francs by doing actually single one of that survey. So this is where we are. So we're really glad to do this, in other words. Okay, I guess you have more, you probably have some more pictures of that. This is actually the system we're using as a commercial system. We're very happy about that. Very happy about the Swiss Polar Institute who has sponsored and brought us together. And here's actually some first data that we have produced more than a year ago now, November 20, and December 22, across both from east to west and west to east. And so you see the measurements. So we get actually this is not yet final product yet, but it shows we actually can do the job the system works. And with that, I'd like to hand over to you, Oli. Here's the team. So, first, Oli, Thomas Fröhliche, and then Jacques from Lausanne, and Thomas from the University of Bern. Now, let me switch the slides while you get ready. So, as I said, it was a big pleasure then that the Swiss Polar Institute brought us together. And there's actually more that brings us together, which turns out later on I learned that he grew up very close to where I grew up, about 500 meters apart. But yeah, I didn't live in, it was in the upper street. So he's really from down the lake here. Somebody who really grew up. I guess he learned sailing probably in the worst lake in Switzerland to learn sailing. But you can see that even in one of the worst lakes, you can actually make it to the world. So grew up in Rapperswil, then actually high school education, then university studies, got a degree in management economics. But then said, okay, well, really what the thing I want to do is sailing, and sort of entered the professional sailing career. From there, I guess you take us. Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks for having me. Cool, yeah. As Nick said, I now have about 30 minutes to tell you a little bit about what the Vendée Globe is actually all about, how I ended up doing what I do now. As he just mentioned, it's not the most obvious choice of a profession growing up at the Lake of Zurich. But then I would also like to talk just a little bit about what it actually entails, sailing these kind of boats on your own over extended distances and periods of time. And then the last part will be about the sustainability strategy of my campaign, why I chose to have a very strong focus on sustainability, and then go a little bit into detail about the ocean sensor that I carry on board. To begin with, I'd like to show you a very quick video that summarizes the Vendée Globe and our campaign very nicely. Well, what's the Vendée Globe race? As you guys, as Nick has mentioned, it's a race solo, non-stop around the world on a sailing boat. The first edition took place in the 1980s, and since its first edition, only 114 people managed to finish this race. If you put it into perspective, during the same period of time, over 5,000 people have been on Mount Everest, over 500 people have been in outer space, only just 100 people managed to sail or finish the Vendée Globe race. The retirement rate is about 50%, so only half of the boats that start actually make it to the finish line, because the race is quite long. It's almost 45,000 kilometers. The route is quite simple. We start in France, in the Département Vendée, just south of Brittany. We sail down the North Atlantic, we cross the equator, we sail down the South Atlantic. When we reach Cape Town, we turn left. We go once around Antarctica. When we pass Cape Horn of South America, we turn left again and then into the finish. So really it's two left turns that you just need to press this straightforward. And the rules are similarly simple. There are three basic rules. If I step foot on dry land, I'm disqualified. If I take anything onto the boat after the start, I'm disqualified. And if I receive any outside assistance, I'm disqualified. You can see that we sail in quite remote places. Quite often during the race, the people in the International Space Station are actually the closest humans to me, apart from my direct competitor. So quite remote and quite far away from help if anything goes wrong. And in France, it's the sporting event with the highest awareness rate. So 97% of the French people know about the Vendée Globe. This number exceeds the Tour de France or the French Open. In France, it's a very, very big event. And it's up to us non-French sailors to promote this event outside of Europe, outside of France, because it is one of the last great challenges that exist on this planet. But how did I end up sailing the Vendée Globe? As I mentioned, or as Nikki mentioned, I grew up in Rapperswil at the other end of the Lake of Zurich, notoriously known for no wind. But you can see I've been playing around on boats all my life. The first time I sailed a boat on my own, I was barely 5 years old when my father set me in a little dinghy, gave me a push, and I did my first laps of the lake. And as a young, 5-year-old, you're normally under very close supervision of your parents. But the moment you're on a boat and your parents are on land, it gives you a sense of freedom. And I got hooked, and I never really stopped sailing. But as we mentioned earlier, my focus when I was younger was a lot on education, first normal school, high school, then university, and then also I was very keen to have a successful corporate career. Due to this reason, I actually went to Asia for 2 years. I studied in Taiwan, I studied Chinese, and I did some business internships in Singapore and Hong Kong. But funny enough, this trip that was supposed to boost my corporate career, I actually started with professional sailing. So it was the first time that I actually got paid going racing. And when my time finished in Asia, I had to go back to Zurich, got my degree, and I started actually working as well in the private sector. But very soon I realized that that's not what I want to do. And so I quit my job, put my suit in a wardrobe, and moved to England to try and become a professional sailor. That was pretty much exactly 10 years ago. And in these 10 years, I've sailed an average of, I sailed over 120,000 miles. If you add this up, it's about 5 times around the world. I've done numerous transatlantics, sailed across the equator a couple of times, did lots and lots of offshore races, and was part of 2 world records. As you can see, I've been sailing in pretty much every ocean in the world, or every continent in the world. And now it's time this November to start the Vendée Globe. The Vendée Globe starts on the 10th of November. And do the first lap for me of the planet solo, non-stop. But what does it entail, sailing these boats on your own over extended periods of time? So my boat is 20 meters long. My mast is 30 meters high. The average sail area, or the maximum sail area that I can use at any time, is just over 600 square meters. That's more than 2 tennis courts. So it's quite a lot of sail area and quite a big boat to manage yourself. But having said that, this is learnable and people can teach you this. I would say most of you in this room, with a bit of training and a bit of teaching and a bit of grit and motivation, you would all be able to sail one of these boats, let's say solo, across the Atlantic. You need to have solid sailing skills. You need to have solid sailing skills. You need to have good navigational skills, good meteorological skills. You need to have a working understanding of all the systems and technologies on the boat, because you can be absolutely sure the boat will break at some point and you will have to fix it. So a bit of an understanding of all the systems on board is crucial, but most of it is teachable, and I call them kind of the critical hard skills. The challenge really comes in when you do it in a racing environment, because you always try to push the boat to 100% or even 100%, and then it's more the mental side that comes into play, and being able to deal with the stress over extended periods of time is not easy. And I noticed this very early also in the team I used to work with before I started my own campaign. This was a big focus. So from the very beginning, I worked together with, or I am working together with a mental performance coach, Dr. Wolfgang Jenewein. And with him, I have regular sessions all the time, not just before a race, to kind of prepare and improve my mental strength and the ability to race these boats solo. So what are the challenges when you sail these boats? The most obvious one, and the one I get asked the most about, is how do you deal with the isolation? So an average race, I expect it to take about 90 days to circumnavigate the globe, and I will not see another single human being for these 90 days. If I do, then something is most likely wrong and I'm out of the race. So how do you deal with this? My performance coach and I, we realized that nowadays people use being alone and being lonely almost as synonyms. It's not, it's actually something completely different. Being alone is a physical state, meaning you physically don't have anyone else around you. Being lonely is a purely emotional state. It's got nothing to do with what's physically happening around you. Once you start to separate these two words, it's much easier to deal with. I am definitely not lonely. When I race, I might be on my own on the boat, but I have a team in the background that keeps track of me and my performance. I have, I don't know, followers on social media. I have sponsors supporting my campaign. I have journalists calling me every day on the satellite phone to get an interview. And when I cross the finish line, there's lots of media around. So I'm definitely not lonely, just alone, or how I call it, isolated. I might be isolated, but not lonely. Once you do this separation, it becomes much easier. Another big challenge is sleep. You can imagine, sailing a boat like this on your own, you can't really go to sleep for hours on end. I never sleep more than 30 to 40 minutes in a row. So I still sleep 4 to 6 hours a day, but never more than 30 to 40 minutes in a row. My alarm is very loud. It's 140 decibels. And it works on a kitchen timer basis. So it's not a digital watch or anything. It's a kitchen timer. And the kitchen timer maxes out at 40 minutes, that I don't get tempted to sleep for longer. Why only 30 to 40 minutes? I'm quite an ambitious and competitive guy. And whenever I go to sleep and the autopilot sails the boat, and I'm not really in charge of the boat anymore, the boat sails about 10% slower, which is not acceptable for me. The other reason is that I can quite easily predict my environment for the next 30 minutes. I have lots of technology that helps me, like radar, etc., and the anti-collision softwares. But it's a very dynamic environment I'm sailing in, and the wind can change, the waves can change. Suddenly there might be shipping around the corner. And if I only sleep for these 30, 40 minutes, it's very easy for me to predict that nothing will change greatly in this period of time. If I sleep more, then it becomes a bit of a Russian roulette, and I'm not willing to deal with this risk. And another challenge, the third challenge, is the food. So when I sail in nice weather, warm temperatures, not too much wind, I don't have too much going on the boat, my minimum intake of calories is 3,500 a day. But when it gets cold, like in the Southern Ocean or in the North Atlantic, far North Atlantic, and there's lots of wind, I might have to do lots of sail changes. I might have to, I don't know, fix the boat. I can't sleep much. It's quite intense. I consume 6,500 calories a day. You convert this, it's about 13 Big Macs a day, but there's no McDonald's in the middle of the ocean, so I have to rely on what we call freeze-dried food. So my boat is built as light as possible. It's all carbon fiber, and I really take a lot of care in not carrying too much weight on the boat. So I don't have a kitchen on the boat. I don't have a fridge or a freezer on the boat, meaning I can't really hold any fresh produce. After a week or so, the fresh produce is gone, and then I'm down to freeze-dried food, and it looks horrendous. It tastes just a little bit better than horrendous, and I only have about 5 meal choices. And after 90 days, you get bored of it. So it's a real discipline also to keep track of your calorie intake and make sure you eat enough. There is no way, it doesn't happen that I eat too much. If anything, I don't eat enough. And I have a sponsor, the Heer Clinic. They actually always check my fitness and my blood values, etc., before a race and after a race. And they say, look, Ollie, you have to set off with at least 20% of body fat. Otherwise, you might diminish on your way around the world. So, yeah, I have to eat a lot. Managing fears and problems. And that's another thing that's not easy when you're sailing on your own. And I used to struggle with this when I started my solo sailing campaign 2 years ago, especially with fear and crisis mode at sea. Fear, I realized, or together with my coach, we realized in the normal world, fear is associated with quite negative thoughts. It's nothing positive, nothing really, value. For me, it's actually now the opposite. I value fear. And for me, fear is a very powerful tool because it shows me two things. Even when I'm really tired, the moment I'm afraid of something, it means I'm aware of the risk of what I'm doing, or of a maneuver that's ahead of me, or a repair that I need to do, or an action that I need to take. And also it forces me to analyze the risk and make sure that I'm happy with my next steps. As an example, for instance, every now and then I have to climb my mast. As I mentioned, it's 30 meters high, and I'm not afraid of heights, but I absolutely hate it. And I'm afraid, I'm literally afraid of going up there. But why am I afraid? Because number one fear is that I fall off the mast for some reason. But nowadays, all my kit is tested multiple times. I've trained it. I've gone up the mast dozens of times, if not 100 times. So I definitely don't fall off the mast. It's an imagine. Yeah, it's just in my head. It's not a realistic fear. The other thing might be that I hit my head on the mast, because as you imagine, if the boat moves a little bit on the sea, at sea level in 30 meters, there are quite some G-forces throwing you around. So that's a realistic fear. Therefore, I wear a helmet. And that way, I kind of go through this risk assessment in my head, and I change my approach slightly until my fear becomes manageable. And then I turn the autopilot on, get into my harness, put my helmet on, and climb up the mast. Dealing with crisis at sea or with serious problems is not easy as well. Actually, this quote is it's printed out and stuck to the inside of my boat. It says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. It's from a psychologist called Viktor Frankl. I guess most of you have heard his name. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was actually in a concentration camp. And while in a concentration camp, he wrote this quote. What does this mean for me? So humans have this trait that if they are faced with a serious problem, they want to overcome the problem as quickly as possible and move on with their life or their activity, whatever they're doing. They are solely focused on getting rid of the problem as quickly as possible, rather than getting rid of the problem in the best and most sustainable way. And for me, it's very important that I make the right decision in a crisis moment, because I carry lots of repair material and spare parts on the boat, but never that much that I can do the same repair twice. So if I do a repair, it has to hold, otherwise my race is over. And this quote kind of reminds me of this. And we as human beings are the only ones on the planet really to be able to do that. Normally, every animal, every species pretty much on the planet, it's either fight or flight, and they have an instant reaction and then react. Whereas we can actually take a breath, think about it, take in all the information, and then make the most qualified decision you can do in that moment. And the last point about sailing these boats and the mental challenges that come with it, managing goals and objectives. The bar is a little bit in the way, but you can, yeah, that's what it says. Managing goals and objectives. The reason why I entered this is when I did my first solo transatlantic race 2 years, well, just over a year ago, 1.5 years ago, I left the marina, the harbor, and before I even hit the start line, I had a bit of a meltdown. I started to cry like a little baby, and I called my mental performance coach to ask what is wrong. And so we quickly talked about it before the race, but then did a big debrief afterwards. And basically, the moment I stepped on board, I thought about what is happening now. I thought, okay, I won't see my family. I won't see anyone, in fact, for the next 3 weeks. I only sleep 30 minutes in a row. I have no way of taking a shower. I don't have a bed. I don't have good food. I might have to climb up the mast on my own. And it was just all too much. And I crashed and I had a bit of a breakdown. What I now always do is I split up my overall objective, which this November will be sailing solo nonstop around the world, into tiny little bits. And I think it's something that every person, even on land, can use and benefit from, by just splitting up your big objective into smaller manageable goals. And every time you reach a goal, you somehow try and then also reward yourself with something nice. For me, on race start day, for instance, the first thing I do is just think about getting the boat out of the harbor together with my team on the boat. Second goal will be to get the team safely off my boat and start sailing on my own. Third one might be cross the start line, start the race, sail through the first night. And then if everything goes well, you can set the goalpost a little bit further away, maybe sail down to the Canary Islands, sail across the equator, sail from there down to Cape Town. And by adding all these little goals up into a successful streak, you suddenly manage to realize quite a big objective that at first seems not achievable. So talking about our sustainability strategy in my sailing campaign. So we decided on 3 different what we call pillars of our sustainability strategy. First of all, we are one of the first, if not the first, professional sailing campaign with an official climate neutral label. So we work together with a company called Climate Partner from Germany, and they advise us on minimizing our carbon footprint. And whatever we can't avoid in terms of carbon emissions, we offset in the best possible way. I'm quite proud of this because not many teams have done this or have achieved that. Second one is the environmental data campaign. That's where we work together with the ETH, the UNIBE and University of Lausanne, and with the SPI. I get into a bit more detail in a second. And the third one is sustainable technologies. We are using our boat as a floating R&D lab to help promote or develop and promote sustainable technologies. We've now just signed a deal with, or a partnership with, a Austrian company called DAS Energy. They are a solar energy provider, and they want to develop a range of solar panels that are specially designed for the marine application. And we're kind of now developing these panels with them. We're actually next week installing 2 kilowatt of solar panels onto my boat. But also I have a little hydro generator, or 2 hydro generators at the back of my boat. I have the latest lithium-ion battery bank on my boat. Energy is a very important part of a race boat. Even though we're powered by sails and powered by wind, my boat uses almost half a kilowatt. And if I run out of power, that's my race over. There's no chance I can sail without the help of a pilot, etc. So this is a very important point for me personally. I would like, and I can tell you this in a year's time when I've done the Vendée Globe, I am convinced that it is a sustainable technologies and renewable energy is actually a competitive advantage. I am sure that I can save, or the diesel saved by having solar panels and hydro generators on my boat is a bigger save in weight than the installation of these renewable technologies. I'm not sure yet. We haven't done it. It's very difficult to calculate the efficiency of panels at sea because my boat heels over. There's always a lot of shadow from my sails, and it's quite a narrow angle of the sun, especially in the Southern Ocean. But we're tracking this data on the boat, and in a year's time, I'll know if it's a competitive advantage or not. So let's talk a little bit about the ocean sensor on the boat, and why I do it, or why I pay this price to have this sensor on the boat. First of all, thanks to the Swiss Polar Institute, this sensor is actually, it's a very modern, fancy piece of equipment. You can't really see it, but the whole frame and everything supporting it is made out of carbon fiber, because the price in a way I pay is the weight of the installation. The whole weight we measured it is just under 20 kilograms. It's 19.5 kilograms. It's not insignificant, but it's a price I'm more more than happy to pay. In terms of electricity, it uses 1 ampere at 24 volts. So yes, it does consume quite a bit of energy, but having hydro generators on the boat and solar panels, we can kind of offset this installation. And then Nikki already mentioned what kind of data we collect, etc. There is another reason why I do this, and it's a little bit, I don't know if it's egoistic or self-centered reason, but the Vendée Globe campaign takes 4 years, and it's a lot of money. There are lots of sponsors involved. It's a lot of work. I have an entire team working in the background, and we basically do this whole campaign for one race. And at this one race, there is a 50% chance that I don't make it into the finish, which sounds quite frustrating. Mistakes are not ideal. But what I tell myself is, even if I don't cross the finish line and I have to stop at some point to race, each data set that I was able to collect is still a valuable contribution to the world of science and to further understand how our planet exactly works. And for me in the background, it's good to know that even if I don't successfully finish the race, I still the campaign as a whole was still beneficial to the world. And why do we have to act now? Now, I mean, there are lots of reasons, and we're here at the ETH. I don't have to tell you that the world and the climate is in a bad shape. In the last 10 years, I've spent more time at sea than on land. And I think as a sailor, always being exposed to the climate and the weather, spending time on the ocean, we're very good ambassadors to this issue. What I can't tell you is, I don't know, that the sea temperature is rising, because it's very difficult to really measure this. There are other people that can do this, can do better than that. I can't really tell you that, I don't know, the biodiversity is decreasing. I can't really tell you that there's more plastic floating around, even though I spend a lot of time on the ocean. Quantifying it is not an easy task. But what I can tell is that our weather is going a little bit nuts. Compared to 10 years ago, when I first started professional sailing, the weather systems, especially the extreme weather systems, for instance, in the North Atlantic, have changed drastically. Winter storms arrive much earlier. They last much longer into the season. The hurricane season in the Caribbean, where you do a lot of racing when you're sailing on race boats, it starts much earlier and lasts for much longer. And it's clear to me that something is very wrong with our weather. I want to quickly show this picture, take reference to it. So last November, we were supposed to start a transatlantic race from Le Havre, which is in Normandy in the English Channel, to Martinique via a island of Brazil. And then we were always looking at the weather forecast quite in detail. And the race actually had to be postponed, which is a very rare thing to happen because of this weather system approaching. And I don't know if any one of you is into weather or studies it. It's an impressive front. I mean, you see this, yeah, not very often, and you definitely don't see it end of October or beginning of November. And you have a front reaching from Cork in Ireland almost to the West Indies in the Caribbean, and we were supposed to be pretty much exactly at this corner as it hit us. So the race direction said, no, we keep you in port and we will start you once this front is passed. We still saw 55 knots, almost 60 knots in the first 2 nights, but it's a very punchy system. And this lighthouse, top right corner on the screen, it's the lighthouse outside where my boat is based in Brittany. And we sail there very often, we train there very often, and it was actually pretty much a waypoint of the race. During this front, they measured 21.5 meter waves at this lighthouse. I am okay to deal with anything up to 8, 9 meters. In an absolute emergency, I might be able to deal with 10 meters, 11 meters, 21 meters. There's no chance a boat would survive this. So yeah, something is definitely wrong. And I, as a sailor, I think, or we as sailors in the Vendée Globe, we're very good ambassadors to let people know about the seriousness of the situation, especially I think in Switzerland, because a lot of people feel a little bit detached from the oceans and what's happening out there. Well, that was it from my side.
Okay, I think the floor is open for questions, also from those online. For those online, maybe Yeah, let's speak up so you can check.
Yeah.
You get those 20-meter waves in the ocean, do you get evacuated by helicopter or you just...
Good question. Now with helicopters, they're a great tool to get rescued, but a normal helicopter, well, not a normal one, even a one designed for rescue, has a range of about 350 kilometers. I sail up to 800 kilometers in a day, so very quickly I'm out of helicopter range. And the only thing you can do if you get into this kind of stuff, and it depends a bit where these waves hit you. If you're away from the continental shelf, in the very deep water, the period becomes much longer, meaning they're still high, but they go up, 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 and down, 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 and then they're kind of manageable. And what you would do, you turn downwind, that the waves are from behind, then you can manage it. This weather system I showed you, the problem was that we would have hit the weather system directly at the corner of Europe, meaning we're still on the continental shelf. The water depth goes from 2,000 meters to 1,500 meters to 150 meters. And then on this shelf, the waves just get ridiculously busy, and we cannot turn downwind because we take the shore within 2 hours. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but if you hit storm, very bad weather, I prefer to be in the middle of the ocean because then you can kind of run away or you can sit it out. If you're close to shore, the stakes are much higher.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation and all the best for the.
Thank you.
I would have 2 questions actually. First one would be about the boat and the development of your yacht. Like, is it that every team kind of constructs their own boat and then like it's like in Formula One, you have some maybe requirements, but then you can have an edge with the boat development. And second question is about the sleep because it sounds
terrible.
possible to me.
Sounds terrible.
Like 30 minutes. Like how is it possible like to train this on land, or are you already so used to it from here?
Yes, it's a good, yeah, both are valid questions. Yes, you can compare it to Formula One. So basically, if you build a boat, the boat has to fit a certain rule. And within this rule, you can build whatever you want. So this term is very similar to the Formula One. But then building a boat or buying a second-hand boat is a big question about budget.
Mm-hmm.
So my boat is second-hand. In fact, it's done the Vendée Globe 3 times already. So it's a very solid boat. It's not, realistically, it's not a boat I can win to race, but that's all right. That's my first race. The average age of a Vendée Globe skipper is about 45. I'm 35, so I still got quite a wishes ahead of me. But I know it's reliable. That's a benefit for me. And the other thing is a budget question. So I can say my boat was at the high end of 6 figures. But if you want to build a new boat, the leading teams now, they have a budget of about 7 million a year. And right now, yeah, we are growing our campaign organically. I'm quite happy with the boat I have because it's solid. But yes, eventually it will be. It will be. Yeah, I want to build my own boat, and eventually I want to win the Vendée Globe. To the sleep thing, yes, it's not easy. But the funny thing is your body adapts to it. The worst time or the first or day number 3 to day number 5. The first 2 days you tend not to really sleep at all because you're full of adrenaline. And then you start sleeping, but it's very difficult. At some point, your body realizes that you only sleep 30 to 40 minutes in a row. And then what happens is that I go into the REM sleep phase within 5 minutes. Normally it takes an hour, 2 hours until you reach the REM phase where you actually recover. After a while, I go into there, well, within 5 minutes or so. We've done a lot of sleep training and sleep management and sleep monitoring on the Hugo Boss team that I used to be involved with, which was kind of the best funded Vendée Globe team, one of the most successful Vendée Globe teams, and I was the co-skipper there. And we did a lot of research. I also did nights at the sleep laboratory to analyze my normal sleep cycle. But you can't start while you're still on land, impossible. And so you just have to start a race, the bullet, and at some point you get into it. And when I'm back on land, it also takes about 5 days to get into normal sleep pattern again. My wife's not a big fan, and so I tend to sleep in the guest room for the first couple of nights. I literally wake up every 40 minutes thinking I've overslept and I have to change a sail. So yeah, but then after 5 days, you get into a normal room again.
Okay, Felix.
I'm more from the atmospheric science part, so I'm interested in the weather forecast you're using. Are you using commercial or do you have your own weather team?
So yeah, that's a very good question. I mentioned at the beginning that I'm not allowed to receive outside assistance. That includes the weather. So I can only download weather data and models that are available to the public. I have to pay a subscription for it, but I can only use these models, and then I have to analyze them on the boat by myself. So it's the classic models. We have two French models, a European model, an American model. Yeah, and then we download them all, and but then we can also, for instance, look at ASCAT winds and get whatever we want. We can download as long as they're publicly available. Then we have software on the boat to analyze it ourselves.
Another reason not to lose energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I do have an old school barometric pressure reader, which is not too bad. But if you travel at I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 800 kilometers a day, it's not ideal.
Like Marcel,
Just a quick follow-up on the sleeping topic. So after you slept for like half an hour, how long do you stay awake until you?
I try and sleep as much as I can. If the conditions allow it, I wake up, I'm awake for 10-15 minutes, and I go straight back to sleep. If the weather and the conditions and the state of the boat allow it. It can also be that I can't sleep for 1.5 days. Actually, in the race that Nikki showed the track, I didn't sleep for almost 2 days because the wind was very tricky, and I had to do a lot of sail changes, etc. And I then went to bed for 30 minutes in the middle of the night. I woke up and I thought it's nice to have a cup of coffee, and I put on my gas stove and I made 2 cups of coffee because I was convinced that I'm training and my training partner is on the boat. And I'm standing there in the ocean. I have been on my own for 10 days with 2 cups of coffee. And then you realize, okay, Oli, now you have to slow down. Except at least 10% of performance decrease just sleep. You could so that happens as well.
the second cup of coffee got consumed. Yeah.
I was just curious because picking up so what they said about the weather conditions. I mean, over the past couple of months, we have seen these enormously high surface temperatures in the ocean. I mean, like on a global average, but in particular in the North Atlantic Ocean, 2 or 3 degrees warmer than average for the time of the year. And I mean, of course, that's a lot of energy that's in there in the ocean. Then does that somehow lead to anomalous conditions regarding your routing decisions, expectations of storm or whatsoever?
No, it doesn't. No, we don't take the surprisingly high temperature into account. But depending on what kind of route we sail, we do keep a very close eye on the water temperature. For instance, this May, we're doing a transatlantic race from New York to Europe, France. And when you do this, of course, you sail quite far north to have the wind from behind and be ideally just forward of a depression of a frontal system, and you want to be in the Gulf current. And the Gulf current is easiest to find if you have a temperature sensor, big screen in the cockpit that tells you if you're in or out. So that's when we kind of look at the temperature, otherwise we don't.
And just because you bring up the topic of additional measurements on your boat, can we leverage some of that for science? So I mean, like wind speed, for example, I could imagine is relevant when it comes to computing CO2 fluxes, but I was also thinking, can you, for example, measure the tilt of your boat so to get information about wave height or something like that?
Yeah, I have a digital logbook. So my software records everything, and it's at the end it's just a massive CSV file. And certain things I measure at 10 hertz, certain things I only measure or record at 1 hertz. But I store all the information. During the race, I'm not allowed to transfer this. But after the race, funny enough, I spoke to Thomas Fröhlich today, and he's like, yeah, he'd be interested to see this as well. So yes, we record everything.
Just for, actually, we have the sensor that we have on the board actually is a multi-sensor, so it measures CO2 as the main parameter. We also have chlorophyll and oxygen. Actually. Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about the sustainability. So you said that this campaign is the first net zero campaign, and I was wondering.
We believe we are. We can't say we are definitely because there might be a campaign out there who just doesn't promote it. But yeah, we're one of the first ones.
So could you say a bit more about what the main things are that would cause emissions and how you then, change operations to offset them?
I mean, some of them are the very obvious ones that apply to any kind of company or enterprise, which is, for instance, traveling. So whenever I can, here in Brittany, I take the train rather than the car or the airplane. We do things like Meat-Free Monday, where the whole team doesn't eat any meat. But then it goes more into specifics in terms of sailing campaign. My boat is made out of carbon fiber. Now, if you build a race boat like this, it's impossible for you to be carbon neutral because you use the CO2 emissions of building a race boat like this are incredible. My boat is already 12 years old, so I'm over 12 years, in fact. So the company decided that it's already seen as being offset. What we do is, for instance, now the boat is in the boatyard. There are nowadays renewable fibers, biofibers and bioresin and bioglues, where we try to build as many pieces of the boat in biological fibers and biological resin because it makes a massive difference. Carbon and carbon fiber and the glues, the adhesives and resins you need are highly toxic and not good for the environment, and you can't recycle it yet. So that's a big part. You also saw it maybe the box. It's a bit bright now in this room, but carbon fibers are normally black. This box is brown because we used biofibers to build it. It's a little bit heavier and it's not as strong. So certain structural parts we can't build with biofibers, but any hatches, any covers, anything that's not structural, we try and use biological fibers.
Thank you first. And then...
What do you feel are like your strengths as a sailor? And maybe what do you think you want to still work on from now to the race?
I think between now and the race, there's not too much that I can do anymore. But I think one of my strengths is the technical knowledge of these boats. I was responsible for the boat when I was sailing for the Hugo Boss team. I was sponsored by Hugo Boss. I was one of the most successful teams and best funded teams. And I had the overall, I was in charge of the boat, making sure that the boat is always in top shape. But I was always also part of the design team, and then part of the build team. And then I was in charge of the boat when it was finished building. And not many sailors have this knowledge. They come in they were always very good sailors, maybe done the Olympics or something, and then ended up doing the Vendée Globe. I have always worked in the kind of technical side and worked my way up to become co-skipper and start racing these boats, and now decided to do my own thing. So I think that's one of my biggest strengths, to be able to fix the boat when it breaks. But then, I mean, I have now, what is it, March, start is in November, I have 7 months to improve the sailing and getting to know my boat, the little bits, the very specifics, like, I don't know, your car, your clutch feels different to your parents' car, and it's the same with my boat. Everything is a little bit different, so I have to know the noises and the motion of my boat that I very early on detect if something's wrong.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie, for the talk. So about your energy on the boat, I expect you have something like 85, 90 days optimally around, which means like 20 days down to the Southern Ocean, and then up roughly, and then you have like 40, 50 days in the Southern Ocean where I mean, I remember from my own experience in sailing the Southern Ocean, you have many gray days, no sunlight, and you require a lot of sun energy for your energy management. Mm-hmm. Is there a backup plan to think about wind generation, or you rely solely on your hydro?
We considered wind, and that's something as well in the Boss team I used to sail for. We actually had this on the boat as an emergency, as a fourth source of energy. The problem is, and maybe if you sail, you know what I mean. It's a bit difficult to imagine if you don't know sailing boats. The Vendée Globe race is mainly downwind, so the wind coming from behind, and our boats are about the same wind speed, boat speed normally as the wind speed. So we almost always sail the wind speed. That means that there's very little apparent wind on the boat. If someone smokes, you can go at 40 kilometers per hour and you can just light a cigarette like this because there's very little apparent wind. Therefore, wind generators don't really work. But I have 2 hydro generators with a third one downstairs in the stairs. I have 10 solar panels. And so even if some of them start failing, I have lots of small solar panels. And then I have a diesel motor with a very strong alternator. And then I carry a second alternator in the spare spec. But then I also carry pretty much every single bit of the engine as a spare. So I could, if I had to, I could rebuild the engine while I'm sailing. But once you're out of power, that's it. Game over, even though you're sailing, but it's ridiculous.
Two last questions, maybe. Yeah, I think you had already, so maybe.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, how did you get into professional sailing? Did you start with a mini transat or something like that?
That's a good question. No, I didn't. So basically, the reason why I didn't go down the route of starting to sail my own small boat and getting bigger and bigger and bigger is getting funding in Switzerland is almost impossible. If you want to sail a little boat and you have your own plane, no one cares in Switzerland. It's tough reality, but that's the case. So I actually ended up as boat crew. That's how I started professional sailing, as boat crew on a race boat. And then I moved to England and I wanted to become a professional sailor, and then I started first being the boat captain, being in charge of private race boats for owners. And once I call it the pro amateur scene, where half of them are professionals, half of them are amateurs. Once I reached the pinnacle there, and I won some of the biggest races, I then ended up in a fully professional team, again at the bottom, and had to work my way up. And now I do my own campaign, and as the question earlier, I have lots of technical knowledge because I was in the technical world for the last 10 years, and I lack a little bit in sailing experience. So that's something I just have to keep working on.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. How do you train for such an event? I imagine you just try and bring as many miles in as possible, but you also train each worst case scenario that could happen. Or...
Kind of certain, or you at least talk them through, because certain scenarios we can't train unless they happen. We talk through it, but the interesting thing is I very seldomly sail completely on my own. Because when you sail on your own, you don't get a feedback. No one is there to tell you, I think you could have done this better, or think about slightly different, might be easier. So I very seldomly go out completely on my own. I do all the maneuvers on my own and just sail the boat on my own, but I always have someone on the boat just observing me. And then every couple of hours we do a quick debrief, and then we go sailing again. And it's also good if anything ever goes wrong, there's a second pair of hands on the boat to get me out of trouble.
Okay, then we have one more question from the online.
Yes. So since you mentioned the Gulf Stream, how much do you look into sea surface height data to optimize the underlying geostrophic ocean currents?
I think that's good enough actually. So the question, are you using currents because you're sailing on the Gulf Stream? That's colonial period.
I mean, it always sounds very tempting to find the Gulf Stream, the Gulf Current, for instance, or the equatorial current. It's the same, the other way around. It's very tempting to spend a lot of effort and time trying to find it, but you can also waste a lot of time, especially the Gulf. You guys, probably most of you know it, you have the back eddies, and it's not that easy, even though you say, the water's warm, I'm in the current. But then you're suddenly in a back eddy, and the current's even stronger against you. So it's good to be in it, and we do look a little bit at models as well, and checking the sea surface and checking what's the reference temperature I'm looking for, etc. But I do not go crazy about it. If I find it, happy days. If I don't find it, God, yeah, I'm losing this. 1 hour is 2 knots. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. This was fantastic. Inspirational.